Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the last session of the day. We've changed venue, so it's nice to get a little bit of a change of scenery. Much as we love it next door, great to be in here as well. Now that we don't have a live online audience anymore, I can actually say this out loud. We saved the best for last. Don't tell anyone I said that. So really pleased that we're able to finish with a workshop, something practical. You know, a really big thing for us was to make sure that everyone who came today had some practical takeaways. So this is why we decided this would be a great way to finish off. And it is such a pleasure and an honor to have the Natural History Museum represented here today. Dr. Laura Soule and Lauren Hyams are here to run a session with you on urban nature CPD. Thank you so much, and please welcome them to the stage.
Hi, so I'm Lauren Hyams, and I'm Head of Activities on the Urban Nature Project at the Natural History Museum. And we're going to try and make this a really interactive session. You'll be talking to each other a lot. You'll be talking to us at the front, so hopefully we can get some energy in at the end of the day. And this session is really important because, as I'm sure you've heard from lots and lots of people today, and you knew before you came, that the UK is one of the most nature-depleted countries on Earth, which means it's now more important than ever that young people can be at the heart of a collective effort to restore our biodiversity in the UK. And we know that when young people spend time connecting to nature as children, they are much more likely to go on as adults to be motivated to care and protect for the nature that surrounds them. And at the Natural History Museum, we've been talking to our visitors about their perceptions of biodiversity loss. And we know from speaking to those visitors that a lot of people think that biodiversity loss is a global problem somewhere else, and not an issue that affects us where we live locally today and in the future.
Hi, I'm Dr. Laura Soule, and I manage the national program at the Natural History Museum. What that means is I work with our partner museums across the country to deliver programming that happens outside of London. And thanks for that introduction, Lauren. So that's where the impetus for this project comes from, and what we really want to talk to you all about today is how we're working with students, teachers, schools, and other organizations to begin to address this disconnect that we've observed through our free national program, Explore Urban Nature. So we're working with partner museums across the country, including here in Glasgow with Kelvin Grove. And what we really want to do is get young people everywhere outdoors, investigating urban nature, getting their hands dirty, asking questions, becoming the local experts, and really taking action through science to make a difference. So, as we've said, this is going to be a bit of an interactive session, so maybe get your pen and paper ready or your phone, be prepared to talk to the person next to you and to us. But first of all, we're just going to show you a quick introductory video to the program. Go on to the next slide. So we're going to start by pairing you up. So get ready to talk to the person next to you, because what we really want to do is focus this session on UK biodiversity. So the plants and animals that share the cities and towns where we live, where we work, where we go to school, the education settings that you're from. So want to have a think. So in your pairs, we want one half. We're going to spend 1 minute, and I wanted to apologise that Laura and I both discovered that neither of us wear watches, so we've got our phones just to keep track of time, to give us a timer.
So one of the pairs is going to write down some activities that you enjoy doing outside. So by yourself, with friends, with family. So what do you enjoy doing when you're outdoors? And then the other half of your partner is going to have a think. Maybe think about on your journey here to the venue today, or on your way to school in the mornings, or your normal thing. But have a think about all the plants and animals that you can think of that live in your local area. So we're going to give you 1 minute, and I'm going to set my timer. So each one of you, write down your half, and then you're going to chat. So 5 seconds left to finish writing down some of your activities and your plants and animals. So now, if you turn to the other half of your pair and have a chat together and see if you can discuss all of the plants and animals and activities that you came up with, and have a think about the impacts. So what are the human impacts? So if one of you's written down going for a picnic, then the other person, how could that affect positively or negatively the plants and animals around you? So just go through your list and discuss together the impacts of the activities, the human impacts of the activities on the plants and animals that you've identified that live around you. So I'm going to give you another minute, so just have a chat together about those human impacts. So just give you another 20 seconds to finish off the conversation. Right. Just the kind of burst that we wanted to hear in the room, that you're all talking to each other. And we know if you're teachers, some of you might be happy to shout out. So does any one of the pairs want to sort of shout out any of the activities and human impacts on the plants and animals, the biodiversity surrounding them that you've had a chat about? So if you're brave enough, say sort of where you're from. Brilliant.
negative, but then it can be positive to the fact of encouraging plant life in the garden and hopefully encouraging a home for nature or birds to come and visit the garden and things like that.
Brilliant, exactly. Anybody else got an activity and a human impact from that you want to share? Brilliant, thank you.
Hi, we're from Glasgow. We actually thought that most of the activities that we did probably had negative impacts, so like things like walking, cycling, running, due to like erosion footpaths, and then maybe like things being, turned into concrete surfaces. So all the sort of animals and local biodiversity we thought might have actually been just negatively impacted.
But then the positive impacts on you exercising, spending time in nature, it's a balance, isn't it? And I think that's what we're going to sort of go on to discuss throughout this whole session, that balance between humans and biodiversity, sharing spaces and sort of keeping an eye on that impact that we have.
Yeah, so as Lauren said, with increasing proportions of people in the UK living in urban areas, we do have to think really carefully about how do we provide the things that people need to live, exist, have mental and physical well-being in these spaces that we do share with urban biodiversity without having these negative impacts that some of you have kind of come up with and thought about. So what we are going to be thinking about is how we look at this kind of, it's a very small scale that we've done now. It's the things that you're interested in, the things that you like doing, the things that are quite local to you. Those are kind of the scale upon which we can have an influence or an impact quite directly. But they relate to kind of broader issues, perhaps in the local area, maybe in your region. They might relate to things across the UK. And then these things do also build and tie in to these huge global issues that we're hearing about in the rest of this conference, things like global warming, extreme weather events, and habitat fragmentation. So we can look at these different scales and try and think about how they relate to each other. So the next task that we have for you is to just have a little bit of a think again about some impacts that you might have heard of that are most sort of relevant in your local area. So these might be things that you've heard in the news, kind of perhaps a contentious issue that has come up in your local area. It might be an environmental impact that you know is sort of particularly problematic or might be moving into the future in the place where you live. So try and think of kind of the top 3 issues that you think are really important in the area that you live and work that relate to these kind of environmental issues or biodiversity challenges, but are on a local scale. So I know the area that I live in London, one thing that is particularly impactful is the air quality and the influence that has on people's health and on biodiversity. And another one is mitigating the urban heat island effect. So just have a think. I'll give you, I think, 30 seconds to try and come up with some things. Do you have a chat with the person next to you if you want to? So a lot of you are chatting this through already, but one thing that might be interesting is to talk to the person sitting next to you. If they live in the same area as you, have they identified the same issues that you've identified, or did they have different ideas? And if they live or work in a different place to you, what overlapping issues are there and what different ones are there? So just have a bit of a chat to kind of refine your top 3. Okay, it sounds like some good conversations are occurring. So it's sharing time again. Would anybody like to let us know what they feel are the most important issues related to the environment or biodiversity in their local area?
In my local area, some of the main problems are noise and air quality from transport. And also in my area, they've just cut down 40 trees to build 2 drive-throughs, which will bring more traffic into an already busy area.
Fantastic, yeah. So these decisions that are being made about how we really directly impact biodiversity in an area, cutting down trees, are having an influence, are important issues. Does anyone else want to shout out an answer? Okay, yeah.
I live right off the M8, not literally in the M8, obviously. So I live in commuter belt for Glasgow and Edinburgh, so the amount of construction of new builds we've seen in the last 15 years is incredible. So I've got that in itself, building on green belt, because the brown land is contaminated, or so it's easier to build on green belt, which means an increase in vehicle emissions, a lack of or a loss of biodiversity, and everything that comes with that.
Yeah, fantastic. So it's one issue that does kind of tie into or lead to a lot of other ones as well. All right, thanks everybody. That was really great. So we're going to get you straight back on it again. Now what I'd like you to do is pick one or more of the issues that you identified and have a think about, some of you I think have already thought about this a bit or brought it up. What are the impacts of these issues? But have a think, are there positive impacts for people or for biodiversity of the issues that you've written down? Are there negative impacts? So we often go straight to the negative, so it might be quite easy for you to come up with those. But negative impacts on biodiversity, perhaps negative impacts on people, and any positive impacts on either as well. So once you've picked one and done that, also have a little bit of a think about what could you actually measure to find out how that issue is causing an impact. What change is it causing over time? What observations could you make? What variables could you take measurements of to try and understand what is actually happening as a result of these decisions that we've made? So this one's probably a good one just to immediately chat about with the person next to you. See if you can come up with some ideas of what the impacts are and how you might be able to measure that change over time. Some things to potentially think about in terms of measurements might be how you can measure climatic or environmental variables, or indeed how you can make observations of all of the different species that might be being impacted. So what kinds of observations could you make of the biodiversity itself, and then the different environmental variables that are related. All right, fantastic. So hopefully you've all managed to come up with a few ideas in your pairs. Does anyone want to share out what they thought might be an impact and a measurement? Any brave souls? Thank you.
Well, when we're talking about development, we were saying that there would be positive impacts because obviously if there's more affordable housing for people, however that's going to have an impact not just on the green belt that you're building on, it's also going to have an impact on local infrastructure like schools and doctors and hospitals, so that might be a negative impact if those things, there's not enough of them to go around everybody.
Yeah, fantastic. Those are really great examples, very relevant to the positive and negative impacts on people, and considering how we have needs as well as supporting biodiversity. Does anyone else want to? I think that was no. All right, we'll move on to the next part.
What about all the people who were talking about traffic? Like, is that something that you could like monitor or like measure? How would you think about measuring? Because I think like air pollution and traffic is going to be such a big issue for so many of us living in the city. I just didn't know whether anybody. Go on, you had a little half hand up there that I saw. Can you think about any of the ways that we can that we could measure measure some of those impacts?
I think it will probably be noticeable more by the traffic jams and the kind of, probably, yes, mainly the traffic jams in that area. It's already a built-up area, but I think we'll see more traffic jams. It's near a roundabout, so there's a lot of roads coming off it, so I think we're more likely to see hold-ups on the road, and that leads to frustration and not good for the blood pressure. I think also from the other side of it, with the food outlet side of it, I think we will see an impact in litter, and also the area that they're coming to is also very well served already with independent cafes, and they may see, so there may be an impact on local business as well. So haven't managed to find any positives about this. I'm sorry, but I think that there's going to be a lot of negative impacts from this.
Brilliant, thank you. So I think we wanted to just spend a little bit of time about, now you've noticed some of the impacts and some of the ways that you can monitor those changes over the time, whether it's counting cars in traffic jams or monitoring the air pollution with environmental monitors, or any of the other ways that you can measure those changes over time. Obviously, with your busy days in school, we just really wanted to bring up, give you a chance to have a think about how you could make some of these observations about biodiversity in your school setting. So if you just have a think, maybe if you've got your phone, if you want to, bring up a satellite map of where your school office is, and there's a natural features view. So maybe just have a think about any of the patches of green space. Could be really small, could be sort of one street tree outside your primary school, could be a window box, could be a patch of grass, a park that you could walk to. So just have a think about some of those patches of green space that maybe you could start to notice some of the changes that you've brought up. So have another chat between yourselves.
So when you were thinking about those measurements before, you'd kind of come up with lots of good things that you could observe about how the issues themselves or the impacts were changing. But we're thinking about now, what green spaces can we use to observe the changes in biodiversity as well, and to understand how those things that are kind of having those positive or negative, or in fact mainly negative impacts on humans, might be impacting biodiversity itself. And you have all of these green spaces, hopefully you found some of them when you were looking, that are really close to you. They don't have to be really far away.
And I think, just as a bit of food for thought for your conversations, I'm sure those of us that live in towns and cities, I think like nearly 90% of people in the UK live in towns and cities, and especially in the pandemic. So your school might not be in a lush green space, and you might automatically think that in order to give the young people that you work with an experience to connect to nature, you have to jump on a coach and take them to the Cairngorms or to the Lake District or the Peak District. But actually, I'm sure in the pandemic, we all had to spend time connecting with nature around us in the city in a different way. So it could be about noticing that one tree outside our window and seeing it change through the seasons. It could be about looking at a little patch of grass, our local parks, going to noticing the moss growing in the cracks of the pavement, going to a local pond or canal to look at some, as an amazing place to see some birds. So it's really about just sort of, when you're having a think about those green spaces and the biodiversity changes that you might be able to observe over time, it's really about focusing on how can we do that in the city without having to sort of run off to the countryside, and what are the opportunities, where are the green spaces in your schools, nearby in your local areas, to really have that connection with nature and make some of those observations in terms of biodiversity changes over time that Laura was talking about before. So just sort of really reframing how we think about where nature surrounds us in the cities.
So, hopefully you've managed to find some green spaces on your satellite maps, and we do actually have a youth worker toolkit. When is that coming up?
Yeah, so, sorry, it's really loud. We've been working with the Prince's Trust in Glasgow and Newcastle and Birmingham in London, and we've run a training session for their youth workers, all about taking their the young people that they work with, out in the local urban nature that surrounds them. And we've put together a toolkit, which is full of guidance, top UK urban species to be found commonly, and guidance about health and safety and how to run activities outside with your young people. That's going to be on our website in January. So there'll be a whole toolkit with lots of video content. So if anybody wants any extra support on taking their young people outside and how to run those activities, if you're sort of in the informal youth sector, keep an eye on our website in January.
So as we've gone through this, you've thought about some things that you like doing in the outdoors, the things that are important to you. You've thought about local climate or environment-related issues. You've thought about what you can observe, and you've thought about an outdoor space that you can do it in. These things are all very immediate. When we think about science or a scientific question, it can seem like a very abstract thing, especially for a young person who might not understand what that means. But by taking these different pieces of the puzzle, showcasing what's really close to them, the information that they can find locally, we're empowering you and also the young people to go out and collect data for themselves to try and get at these issues. And if it is local to you, it's perhaps data that's never been collected before. That is scientific data. You and the young people you work with can be scientists. You can contribute to that body of information. So just really quickly, it's late on a Friday. Thank you for sticking with us. If we're thinking about a scientific question, I'm not going to get you to come up with these, but perhaps over the next few weeks, you can sort of think about this. What scientific question could you ask to address those issues that you've come up with in your local area? And when we're thinking about scientific questions that could be perhaps asked or answered by young people, we're looking for these criteria. So making observations, leading to a hypothesis that can be tested, able to collect evidence, don't yet know the answer, and that's sometimes a tricky one, but if you're looking at something in a local area, it's actually fairly unlikely that the question's already been answered. It needs to be unbiased. Don't go in expecting an answer and getting exactly what you thought you were going to get. And having clear and specific words, so really being specific about exactly what your question is, where it's being measured, and what data you're collecting. So that's perhaps something you can think about moving forward over the next few weeks. So the last thing that we're going to get you to do as an activity is to think, what would you decide? So say you've got your issue, you've got your question that you've asked about it, you've collected some data. Perhaps you can't predict what that outcome would be right now, but have a think about that green space that you found. What could you do? What changes could you make that would make it better for biodiversity, that would make it nicer for nature? And what changes could you make that it would make it a better space for humans as well? And are there ways in which those two things overlap? Are there ways we can achieve that balance? So just in that kind of very specific small green space in your school, what things could you do that would actually just make it a nicer place for humans and biodiversity to exist together? This could be really simple things like replanting the grass, or planting some more trees, putting in a bench, or they could be bigger things. So what we want you to do is just come up with a little action plan. How are you going to make that space better for humans and biodiversity? Okay, would anyone like to share all or part of their action plan for their green space? Volunteer over there, thank you.
So we're in Stirling, and we were speaking about one of our very urban schools that we work with that seems like there isn't any green space. Certainly their playground's full of concrete. But it's not far from Stirling Castle, and there's a beautiful walk called the Back of the Hill Walk. which is full of trees and is left very untouched, so it's perfect for nature. But yeah, we were thinking about how do you improve on that, because actually you can't really improve the landscape because it's great as it is. But yeah, you were speaking about a journey, you can chat more.
I don't know if this answers the question, but we were thinking about just going on a journey full of questions. So not expecting to come up with the answers straight away, but just asking, getting lists and lists of questions and then deciding which ones were important to answer and researching from that point.
Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic approach. Does anyone else want to share? As there.
We are from a local school that's actually just about a half an hour walk away, and there's not an awful lot of green space available for the children. But we were talking, saying that there's one sort of patch of grass that we could change up and maybe put like plants and flowers and things that would maybe increase the biodiversity and like bring different animals and insects and things in that would also engage the children, give them something to go and work on and look forward to, and then investigate as well with different things that came into it.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds absolutely fantastic. So yeah, we've got this idea of asking lots of questions, letting the young people lead, and coming up with different ways that we can make even a small green space nicer for humans and biodiversity. And you know, we've kind of done this sort of activity with schools local to us, and the young people did come up with similar ideas. And a little triangle of grass that had 2 trees in it, they were thinking of all the different ways that we could increase the biodiversity of the space. So it is possible to do it in a very small area. So thanks very much for those very excellent plans.
So thank you so much for participating after a really long day. We really appreciate your taking part. And this has just been a small glimpse into the programme that we're running. But hopefully, the importance of involving young people in helping to restore the biodiversity in the UK, making sure young people are at the centre of that, because hopefully together, if young people have the information that they need about the changes that are happening in this country, they'll know how to take action as they get older. And hopefully that will mean that when Sir David Attenborough asked us at the beginning of COP, his call to all of us was to make sure that there's a nature recovery in our lifetimes and the lifetimes of the young people that you work with. This is hopefully how we can start to make sure that that is happening and that young people are taking the lead all across the UK. And I think, so you can see here, so we are running this programme at the Natural History Museum in London, but we are also working with amazing partner museums all across the country. Up here with RSPB and Kelvin Grove in Glasgow. So if any of you from Glasgow or from around the area want to take part in this, there will be, we've got a load of free learning resources online. There will be teacher training, and that is delivered nationally with STEM learning, but also delivered locally as well at the same time through Kelvin Grove. So you'll really get an understanding of the local biodiversity issues in Glasgow. Maybe meet some of the scientists who are doing research, really get that focus, meet lots of other teachers who are also all working on ways to improve biodiversity for their young people. So you might be able to take your idea about how to change up that green patch or the walk that you want to do in Stirling to the next level. And that's going to be happening. There are also in-museum workshops, so you could book on to bring your young people to Kelvin Grove, and they could go through a similar process to what we've done now, but a bit more hands-on practical science learning. So they might be going outside, making some observations of the grass or trees around them in the park. We didn't have the chance to do that here today, but you could, that's what they'll be doing in museums. So you can do that in Kelvin Grove, and you know, young people will be doing that in Birmingham, in Leeds, in Newcastle and Nottingham, and with us London young people are doing it with us at the Natural History Museum. So there's all of that activity in school, in your local museum, online teacher training, and all of those learning resources. And if you would like to sign up to find out more about how you can sign up for sessions in Kelvin, sessions in Glasgow or anywhere else in the country, that is the website. So go sign up there. We'll be in touch, and we've got loads more content like this to help you support your young people to really take a lead in that restoration of nature and UK biodiversity that we really need to see. That's it.
Thank you very much,
you.
everyone.
And Lauren, what a fantastic way to finish. I'm just delighted that we've got teacher training on offer, free resources. Who doesn't love a free resource? And this looks like a terrific program. Look, thank you so much, everybody, and for sticking around to the end. It's been brilliant. I've thoroughly enjoyed the day. I was really looking forward to it. And I hope you've got so many things that you can take away. I always think the most important thing we can do with any professional learning is to make sure it's got impact for our pupils. So I hope that when you get back to your different settings that that will be the case. I'm really confident that it will be. Thank you very much for supporting the event. Thank you to the New York Times for letting us have this opportunity, and to Summerhouse Media for all the logistics, and Kite Insights too. So I hope you have a safe journey home and enjoy yourselves.